welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Gladiators of Sport here at Liquid Black Coffee, the magnificent coffee premises here in the beautiful Bayside suburb of Middle Park for another edition of the Gladiators of Sport. Yes, we welcome you on board for this fifth show. Looking forward to it here. Got some great guests, a great panel, and we're looking for a big show here today at Liquid Black Coffee here in Middle Park. Just before we introduce our panel, let's pay homage to our magnificent sponsors here. The Managing Director of Alan Mance Holden, Mr. Philip Mance, providing our music in the background, playing a Prince song called Hot Twang. Doing a great job there, Mr. Philip Mance. That's Alan Mance Motors, Footscray, Melton, Bacchus, Mars. Mance Mania has got a Holden me here, baby, for top quality Holden, HSV, Nissan, Suzuki, Mitsubishi, and HSV motor vehicles, and Citroën. Mon ami, don't forget your Citroëns. We also have the great, yes, Philip, thank you very much, sir. I'll come to you in a second. Yellow Door, the best breakfast and brunch eatery here in the suburb of Albert Park, which is also on your bayside there, putting together great brunches. Liquid Black Coffee, where we are right here now. What a magnificent coffee bean that is, grown in the pure soils of Queensland and delivered to you down here in Melbourne, Victoria. You can go to the website, Liquid Black Coffee, purchase your coffee beans in bags straight off the beater there with the magnificent Liquid Black Coffee. You can come down to a Liquid Black Coffee coffee shop here in 165 Ashworth Street, Middle Park, and buy yourself a great cup of coffee. And you can also, and there it is right now, Philip Mance has been very kind to deliver me exactly the product you see here, these coffee beans made in those pure soils of Queensland, pure coffee beans for you to make pure coffee at home. Riccardo's Trattoria, the best Italian eatery in the Southern Hemisphere, is also available for your, attendance in Albert Park as well. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. To my right, I have the former editor of the Herald Sun Sports Division for many years. He's a Tasmanian. He's written books on the history of the North Melbourne Football Club, on Tasmanian football, the greatest players in the history of Tasmanian football. Mr. Geoffrey Poulter, how are you, Geoffrey?
Pleasure, Stephen. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, always a pleasure, Geoffrey. To my left, I have the new Werribee Chief Executive Officer, I think is the title. He's been the list manager down there for many years. He's an SEN 1116 personnel, persona. He's got it all. Mr. Mark Stone, how are you, Mark?
G'day, Peaky, and I'm actually football operations, but that's okay. I'll take the title of CEO, and Mark Penalina, well done.
Football operations from 1116 SEN, presenting many shows on that medium over the last 11 years, Mr. Troy Zantuck.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you very much, Stoney. Great to have Geoffrey Poulter once again, and fabulous Philip Mance in the studio.
No doubt about that. And, of course, we've introduced
hang on.
this man here.
What about the new studio?
And, of course, Mr. Philip Mance has just pointed out how the great Middle Park and Albert Park building
no one can see,
which is called the Spartels Group. That's Michael Spartels, who is currently in the studio with us, and Mr. Nick Spartels have kindly built this magnificent panel here during the week to provide us with a more stable environment for presenting this program for you today. We do thank the Spartels Building Group for their magnificent support and help down here in the studio. Thank you, Michael. Right, gentlemen, down to a bit of business here. Now, look, last week, I know this issue has caused some consternation, but we need to do a bit of house cleaning because we did touch on the issues of coaches' win-loss records in finals. I've come up with some very interesting statistics when I went back over the history books. You wouldn't believe who's number one. You probably know this already, do you?
No.
Number one on the list is Alistair Clarkson with 72.73%, 16 wins, 6 losses out of 22 finals matches. Second on the list, this is something that's going to, you should know, Geoffrey. Number two, because it's a North Melbourne man. He's been elsewhere as well.
Dennis Pagan.
No, it's Malcolm Blight with 65.22%. Then you go to Lee Matthews, 64.81%. Dennis Pagan's got 63.64%, so two North Melbourne personalities there.
Yeah.
Norm Smith's at the 66% mark, John Kennedy 61. Now, what's amazing about it is, and this is why this happens, this is why there was consternation over the Barassi figures of 53.03. Barassi, Hafey, Jeans and Kennedy were up against each other in the 60s, 70s and some of the 80s all the time. Hafey'd win a game, a finals match, Jeans would win one, Barassi would win one, the other one would win one. So
and there's also that situation where you actually had to win. You could lose, as you pointed out. You could win the first semi, and lose the elimination, the preliminary, and you're only a 50% strike rate, and yet you managed to get your team into two finals in a final 4 out of 12 situation.
And Stephen, it comes back to 1 point. again, it's still been going to test of time. Recruitment of the right players, Stephen, at the right time.
At the right time, yeah.
To ripen the premiership possibilities.
Yeah, it does, but what makes Barassi's record good, and this is how you can see it makes it pristine, is that he won 4 grand finals out of having that average of 53.03. He won the big dance gun when it had to be won. He would have possibly the best strike rate of grand finals to finals matches. That's one stat we haven't yet worked out. Sheedy is at 53.49%, so you can see that anything above 50% is, you're doing very, very well.
Absolutely.
Johnny Northey at 55% with 11 wins and 9 losses in finals. I mean, no one would have expected that. Chris Scott's at 44% now. Brad Scott at North. He's higher at 57%, but he's had less matches to in finals here, but he'll improve that this year. Bob Rose. Now, this is a man I feel very sorry for Bob Rose, because I thought he had some excellent teams in here. He just couldn't crack it for premiership, but his finals record is terrible. It's 3 wins, 11 losses out of 14 finals. 21.43%, which is tragic, but that's how it works. So
He lost
we've
4
clarified that.
four grand finals were less than 2 goals or something.
Correct. And of course, Alan Jeans, his record went to 62.26%. When he left St Kilda, he got bolstered going to Hawthorn. That was a big help for him. Now, Mark, you've got some on-the-spot news about Collingwood's team for the match this weekend, because they've had 2 omissions already, have they?
They have, and Stephen, thanks for prompting me there, but we'll get to it in a minute.
We'll get that in a minute, aren't we?
Yes.
I was going to let you read that out. I thought you would have had it ready, but you seem to have emulsified it this evening.
Here we go. Here we go.
Yes, sir.
Collingwood duo Taylor Adams and Travis Varco ruled out a Carlton clash. So Collingwood aren't having much luck with injuries in recent times. So Taylor Adams and Travis Varco out of the Carlton-Collingwood game. And also Tom Langan and Ben Sinclair, they actually went out Thursday night. So they got possibly massive issues there. But there's a note in this little report from AFL Collingwood. Star duo Scott Penderbury and Steele Sidebottom failed to train, but Collingwood are confident both will play in that game. So they got a few issues there in the injury front.
So they've got some big injury issues down there as well.
I think Collingwood have beaten Carlton something like the last 7 times or 6 times, and if they actually beat them tomorrow, it's the first time it's happened since 1890 something that they've had that many wins in a row against Carlton.
Really? Yeah, that's a good stat.
After your news, Stoney, it mightn't be it's so cut and
Carlton
dry.
are a chance now, I reckon. I don't know what
Carlton's odds would have to shorten dramatically.
I would think that Carlton have won more of the Carlton-Collingwood games over the 100 years, but I'm just saying, just in this particular period, Collingwood have won something like the last 6, and never won, and have never won. Even in the teams, the famous teams I want to mention about Albert Collier later on, a true gladiator of football. Even in those great Collingwood teams that won 4 in a row and when they won 6 in 9 years or something, they still didn't manage to beat Carlton more than 6 times in a row.
What's the odds there at Peaky at the moment? Is the odds in the paper there?
The odds at the moment, you've caught me on the hop there. But
it was $1.36 and $3.15.
There you go.
It's not going to be like that now, is it?
No. Well, their emergency's got to go on McCaffer, Phillips, and Cloak. Well, there's an interesting situation for them, because Buckley's already said Cloak's got to spend more time in the VFL, so that brings it down to McCaffer and Phillips.
There is speculation, Stephen, as we speak, that Travis Cloak may play, not substantiated, but Travis Cloak may play at the weekend.
I've got a feeling with the number of outs that they have to seriously consider beefing up their forward line with Travis Cloak tomorrow, because Carlton, they're not very strong down the defensive part.
As well as Big Cox. They want him as well, okay.
The big American from Ohio.
Ohio.
Yeah.
Is it Ohio?
Ohio.
Close, Stephen.
Close to where?
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma from Mr. Zantuck.
Just like
Oklahoma University, basketball. Originally? Yeah, he's nodding yes. That means yes.
Where the sun
Troy would know that,
where the
actually.
sun shines mainly on the plane.
Well, they're looking at the boys over there. Oh, Geoffrey, you're right there.
Anyway, have we got, Stephen, we got any issues we need to talk
we've got
about?
of issues. Well, look, the reason why we played Hot Thing by Prince, because we were doing actually a bit of a number there for Chris Gale, because he's, unfortunately for him, he can't get a contract.
Is he a victim of his own circumstance, Stephen?
I think he was a victim of his own ego, Mark, and what's happened, and his own stupidity. That what's happened now is that from what happened last summer, it doesn't matter what you say about it, and I said this last night, 11-16 SEN, you can whinge and carry on all you like about, it wasn't insulting, she should have handled it better, and all this sort of business. The fact of the matter is, he's just lost a contract worth $300,000, $400,000 over stupid gaff.
Do you reckon he cares?
Well, if he's got $10 or $20
playing.
million in the bank, he probably doesn't care. Yeah?
And he has got that, I reckon.
Has he got that? Well, then maybe he doesn't care. I mean, I thought he wanted to. It sounded like he wanted to be out here.
I think he did.
Wanted to be here. Well, he's blown his own situation.
What actually transpired? Just refresh our memories, Stephen.
Well, he was being interviewed after Big Bash League. I think it was it the in the season by Mel McLaughlin from the TV station that she worked with at
Channel
that time,
10. Yep.
And he made comments to her while she was trying to interview him about the match. He was asking her out that night for a drink, and when she didn't respond to him and she went on with the cricket question, he said, "Don't blush, baby."
Was he mucking around, Stephen?
He might have been mucking around.
Well, you reckon he was G'd on by his teammates?
He might have been. He may have been. Yeah, he may have been at all that
Inappropriate time, though.
Yeah, the problem I think with that situation is that Chris Gale and perhaps the Melbourne Renegades he was playing with at the time, was he not? Maybe they should understand and read discrimination law and employment law issues at the workplace when someone's at a workplace about that does apply to the other people there who they may regard as, servants of the sport or not all that important. They've got to show respect. And he
New age
in the
of
circumstances.
political correctness too, isn't it?
Well, yeah, Geoffrey, I hear where you're coming from, and that in the past something like that might have been just brushed aside, but...
How long ago, Stephen? How long ago would that be brushed under the table?
Well, 20 years ago, 10 years ago even, but not now.
No.
Not now, because you've now got a lot of female journalists, people who are involved in the sport on an administrative basis, all sports, professional sports.
It doesn't even mean females. It could be males and females.
Well, it means,
too.
yeah, it could well be. Could have
So,
could have well.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not thinking about that equation. At this
Well,
point in time,
it happens
it
sometimes, Stephen.
You can have sexual discrimination or any type of employment discrimination can happen between men and women.
Women and men.
Women and women, men and men.
Absolutely.
Whatever.
Well,
So
put
it's across the
yourself
board.
in Mel's position, Stephen. What course of action would you have taken?
In Mel's position, well, she had options that she decided not to pursue because she decided to move on from what happened. So she took the view that, well, I want to keep working in the media, or I want to keep working with this station. I'm not going to make a hullabaloo about it or whatever. But you could see at the time she was aggravated and distressed because she walked away from the cricketer with a glum look on her face and just stopped the interview. So, I mean, the commentators who were upstairs who were originally laughing about it all were very much straight-faced and looking very nervous when allegedly, they got an edict from the management to make an on-air apology after it happened. And those ex-cricketers and sportsmen became very quiet and subdued after that statement was being read. So it's just a matter of just following proper procedure now. I mean, I don't think you'll find a cricketer make that mistake again, or any sportsman or woman in that environment.
Yeah, but what I'm asking you, if you were Mel McLaughlin, how would you have reacted to it? Would you have brushed it off? Would you?
If I was Mel McLaughlin, putting myself in her shoes.
Would you have mentioned to Channel 10, the head honchos, that you weren't happy with the way you were treated? How would you have reacted to it?
Yeah, but this is what... So the trouble is this, is that if you're a victim of a circumstance, it's up to you how you react to it. If you... The way she reacted, she decided not to pursue it. That was her right. She had options. She could have pursued it. Said, I'm not happy with that at all, I'm going to pursue that. But it would have been more against her employer in that circumstance, and probably Cricket Australia, who put that sport on, who put the game on, as opposed to Gale, and whether or not she could have got to... But I don't think she wasn't in the position where she wanted to start issuing legal proceedings left, right and centre. She just wasn't... She indicated that within a day that she wanted to move on. That's her prerogative. She's got options.
Would Chris
Gale at that
Gale
point had no options.
Would Chris Gale have been invited back if that incident had not taken place?
Well, we don't know that because we don't know why no one signed him up. But although one club in Sydney said he doesn't fit our family mould that we've got for this club of mums, dads and kids going to the Big Bash League. He doesn't fit that equation that we've now put together, and therefore he's not wanted by us.
He's an enormous draw card, isn't he, as far as his cricketing skills go?
He is. He's got massive cricketing
and
skills. Skills aren't in question here.
As far as that goes, to me, it's a massive
it's
loss for the Big Bash League. As far as his cricketing skills go, he has no peer.
You'll just remember that Mr. who's the head of the Cricket League, Sutherland, he came out and
James Sutherland.
He said he has not been banned, but no one's given him a contract. But
Okay, well, I'll put this to Stoney. If you were one of the Big Bash teams, Mark, would you have picked him up?
Obviously how politics work and how protocol works. If the Big Bash organisation didn't have a problem, I'd pick him up tomorrow.
Geoffrey?
Yeah, I think so. I think she would have preferred. It's a tactical decision, wasn't it? She didn't want to be seen as a whinger, and that affects your ongoing reputation. She might want to do that job for another 10 years.
Very professional.
So she
job.
loses respect or contacts or whatever, whichever way you feel about it.
She's very highly respected in the sporting commentary world.
Yeah, she does a reasonable job, and I think she probably thought it would have been unwise to pursue it. But purely from an economic point of view, you'd employ him because he's probably the most attractive one-day cricketer, short 20-over cricketer in the world, isn't he?
Yeah, no doubt. Look, it's got nothing to do with his skills, and it's got economic suffer. The crowd don't get to see him play. All of that's a negative for the game. It's all unfortunate. But if a club doesn't choose to sign him up, then that's the end of the story. He's missed out. And he's only got, at the end of the day, Chris Gale's only got himself to blame. I mean, it's right to have an ego and all the rest of it. All he had to do was just wait until the end of the interview. He couldn't wait till the end of the interview to make his comment to her, say, walking off the ground with no microphones around. He didn't have the common sense to leave his risque remarks until they were heading away from the microphones and off the ground.
And I'm going to leave it there because I want to move on to my next subject, right, is about recruiting and topping up players. Now, I know you mentioned that Damien Barrett wrote an article in Poulter. I'll bring in this in the equation here. Is that can AFL members and supporters, corporate sponsors, deal with clubs that say we're going to rebuild? Can they deal with we're going to top up? Can members of sporting clubs especially deal with we're going to rebuild? Why can't they deal with that, Poulter?
Well, it depends on certain clubs, doesn't it? I mean, I know for my club, North Melbourne, we couldn't afford to rebuild. We have to top up forever because we were frightened that if we went down the bottom and had a record of 117 or something, the membership would just fall in half. People would drop off. So you have to. Other clubs can afford to do that. Collingwood did it and won a premiership.
But Carlton,
really,
look at Carlton. Right?
They had 2 poor years. Well, what is it, 6 and 7 or something? Yeah.
Carlton, they call them the Silvertails, and for many years, Jack Elliott and the people that have been there before that, a lot of money. Yeah. They tried to cover it up. They tried to cover up the fact, So there is a proof there that if you're a side of top side, you can actually go to the bottom and come up again.
No, I agree with
People mightn't like it, but that's reality, Stephen.
What you're saying is that Carlton should have done that years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
But their supporters couldn't cope with it. Well, it's not so much supporters.
Well, can they cope with that? So that's the question.
Heavyweight supporters couldn't cope with it. As you say, the people that...
Do you think sides now, Stephen, even whether you're up top side, a Richmond, a Collingwood, an Essendon, do you think the supporters and members and corporates of that club could, if they went to the members and said, listen, we've got to go through a rebuilding stage or we've got to go through a realignment stage, if you want to call it that, can that happen in the modern day?
In the modern day? Well, it can. If the club comes out with a blueprint and says, look, this is the way we've had the think tank going, we've got expert list managers here. If you've got a guy who's highly respected in the marketplace, now whatever you think of him, and there's people for and against Chris Pelkin, if you've got someone like a Chris Pelkin there who says, this is what you've got to do, this is the blueprint, and the president runs with that in the committee, and they come out and have a big meeting with the media and all the rest of it and say, this is the way we're going to go, and I'm not being biased here, but that's what St Kilda did 4 years ago, and said, this is what we're going to do. Or when Alan Richardson was appointed 3 years ago and said, this is the blueprint, the supporters will say, right, we'll run with that because we're keeping a core group of Revolt, Montagna, Fisher, Dempster, and we're bringing in quality young kids or whatever. And if we do happen to pluck a young kid, if we do get a recyclable, they get a Tim Membry who's underused at Sydney but who's got some ability and put him in because he's only 23 years of age anyway. So they're not getting 27, 28-year-old jokers who are, nearly getting towards the end of the line. Richmond's list, as we look at it now, is David King today has described that as the home of the list cloggers. Did you see that comment?
How can you make a statement like that, 28-year-olds getting to the end of the line, when Brett Harvey's playing some great football at the age of 37?
I never called Brett Harvey in that category as a
well, I think that was an over-exaggeration.
No, but he hasn't.
When you're hitting 28.
He's been at one club. He's not moving anywhere. He's at North Melbourne. I don't want to name names, but I could name a few at Richmond who are in that 27, 28, 29-year category who David King is today referring to as a list clogger. That's who I'm referring to. I should have made myself a bit clearer. But
you should have.
Yeah, I should have, but I'm not... we only saw a couple of weeks ago a list of 30-plus-year-olds who Shane Crawford, said would win a flag. this year going around. Have a look at North's forward line. It's a
There's
magnificent forward line.
guy called Jared Waite running around at the moment who may have been over 28 when he went
Troy, I never said
to
anyone
North
over the
Melbourne.
age of 28 was no good.
Playing the
I
best
said-
football
I
of his
said
career.
There's a club out there who has recruited a number of 26, 27, 28-year-olds getting towards the end of their careers. Not because they can't keep up or that they're not fit or whatever, it's because they're not good enough to play. If these guys were still at their clubs, they couldn't get games. Now, I don't have to start naming names of players on the show. King didn't do it today, and I'm not going to start doing it. But you've only got to go through Richmond's list to see who I'm talking about.
When I
Pulse.
said clubs can't afford to go down, I just want to correct that. The situation's changed a bit. That was the case, Stoney and Stephen, but now the AFL have guaranteed the future of clubs over the last couple of years, haven't they?
Yeah.
So, but that wasn't always the case.
Correct.
A la Fitzroy, and
Steve brought up a good point, right? Richmond Football Club. Now, I mentioned before, and we'll talk about GWS in a moment, but recruitment of players is really important. The futuristic or the potential to be able to see a player as a 16-year-old and say, like a McCartan or those type players like a Boyd and those type players who are players destined that they're going to predict in 4 or 5 years' time these players are going to be able to play a lot of senior football and getting the right players. North Melbourne's a different scenario because they know they've got some creative older players who are really playing the best footy, so they've got a window of a couple of years. But I think the idea with Richmond especially is they probably haven't done the best job they can of getting the right recruits. They've done top-ups, players have been recycled through other clubs, and so it hasn't worked for them. So they really need to take stock and go, who can actually play? Who can play 50 games? Who can play 100 games? We've got to get players and play them. But the issue is, can the Richmond supporters deal with that? And that's the question I'm asking. Can they deal with that? I don't think they can.
Well, Dan Richardson said 6 years ago they made a decision the Richmond supporters would not handle it.
But they have to be able to handle it, Stephen, don't they?
Well, they do. I agree with you. It's just
I
really
think-
supporters.
I
Okay,
think they've
Troy,
had-
why can't they handle it? Why can't they handle
They've
the
had
truth, Troy?
36 years of handling it, Mark.
Yeah, but why is the thing is that, you know what, if it takes another 4 years, some clubs haven't won a premiership in 50 years, Troy.
And
Yeah,
there's
but
no
Richmond
guarantee.
have bottomed out over the journey.
But have they done it the right? Like, they've bottomed out.
No,
but
the recruiting, as you say, Mark, and you're an expert on this, the list manager is the most important person at an AFL club.
yeah.
Yeah.
The coach,
he
the
is
coach
the
gets it
compass
next
for
game.
he is the compass for the destiny of that club. Is that a fair comment, Pulse?
I think the point is, Stoney and Troy, and Stephen, there's no guarantees. Now, you can go to the bottom, win no matches at all, get the best bunch of players you want to, and you rise up to a certain level. Now, Richmond's level was about 6th, wasn't it? They haven't been able to win a final, but it's about 6th.
Well, they
And that's
plateaued,
it. It
Pulse.
wasn't
They
good enough, so
plateaued.
down we go, we start all over again.
They've
Like
stagnated.
Fremantle, they're starting all over again. You have
Yeah,
to
but-
start all over again.
Yeah, but why haven't
You don't have to go-
the Swans started all over again? Why haven't Geelong started all over again?
'Cause
And why haven't North Melbourne started all
Well,
over
they
again?
didn't drop that far down. They were still able to patch up.
Geelong
No, but
never gave
they've
them a
stabilised.
No, it's
These
only
teams have the magic formula
Oh, well,
to stabilise and then add to their list.
You've got to give it
And
to
hats
Geelong.
off to them.
Yeah, well, that's true. Not every club needs to go down.
But you know what?
Geelong have changed tack midstream. They were going to go down the kids' route. Now they've decided no. We're going to get in some. They had an opportunity to get Dangerfield, Henderson, Selwood, and Stanley from St Kilda, and they thought, hang on a minute, we don't have to go right down. We can top up with them because they've all got quality. They're quality players, and still get the young kids coming through in the first couple of
Steve-
picks in the
Likewise,
draft.
no matter how well you do it or what way you do it, there's always a level. You can only get so far. There's only one winner. So sometimes if you finish 4th, it's a good result.
Yeah, actually, there's
You go back and
a
start all
there's a school of thought about how do you measure success? Do you measure success by premierships, or do you measure success by continually playing finals and preliminary finals? North Melbourne's got into 2 preliminary finals, and a lot of supporters would say, well, we haven't tasted the ultimate, but we've been pretty successful. And then some are harsh, some are not so harsh. Yeah. But, come back to Geelong.
This is the Ross Lyon debate all over again.
Yeah, come back to Geelong. I watched a lot of the kids, Gregson and these type of players come through the VFL and get a lot of VFL games under their belt.
Lang, McCarthy.
Yeah, those sort of players, yeah.
Yep.
And so they've come back and played. So Stephen Wells, who's a genius, right, sees those players, very good players, but he says, okay, how can we go again? How can we have a tilt so we get some really key players to add to what those kids can do? Has a really good depth in their VFL team. and just so they do it perfect. Their strategies of their recruiting are always on the money. They're always thinking about either playing finals footy, getting some really good kids in there, topping up.
Absolutely,
so they're top. That's what
Stephen
they do.
Wells, the blend.
The
Players that he has at Geelong through his tenure
Yep.
as recruiting manager has been quite unbelievable.
And Sydney the same, Troy.
Sydney's the same.
Yeah.
1990, I think Wells started at Geelong, but for ages, for 20-odd years, he couldn't get a top-quality player from another club down there, just couldn't get him. And then they grabbed Brad Ottens, and then it's opened up since then for them. Because now players see Geelong as not being all that far away after all. But Fremantle, you've got to give them some credit. They can't get anyone over there. They cannot get anybody, and we've seen today the list of players that they've had a crack at, including Travis Cloak, David Armitage, along with Hooker, along with, they've got Gumbleton over there, couldn't play a game. Sylvia didn't work. They've tried everything, and it looks like they're going to have to just stick to West Australian players, basically. They're just going to have to keep reaping through the waffle and the various other leagues and the colleges, trying to find the kids that are going to set them up for the next 10 years. It's a massive job for Ross Lyon. The job he's got in front of him now is going to be massive.
It's not only a massive job for Ross Lyon, it's a massive job for his recruiting team to accumulate. They've got some good kids in the waffle. In the Peel side, they've got some really good kids who are going to take 20, 30, 40 games before they're any good, but they've got some good kids, right? So he has to find some players that, you're right, find some more young, or find a player or two players, three players that they can say, we want you for a 5-year deal, right? He's just got to keep doing it. Their recruiting staff have just got to keep pushing the well.
Well, I'm not saying he has to find the players. His list management and his recruiters all go out and watch all the games.
There are different ways of doing it, and one is the Geelong way. It's some and others are a different way. And
Geelong changed
so basically,
Geoffrey, don't forget.
you've got to cut your coat according to your cloth. Yeah. And that is it. There's not one way that suits all. You either go to the bottom, you go halfway down, you patch up, you do the Geelong way, you do it the Fremantle way. There's no one way.
While we're on this subject, the other one I want to bring up is the GWS recruiting, right? And the new team, the new franchise, and my thoughts and your thoughts and Troy's and the crew out the back there's thoughts about GWS and the recruits that they've put into their stable that they have got. Now, there's a bit of a scream on at the moment, as we know about that the Victorian clubs are going off their head. Someone SEN the other day, I can't think it was, maybe David Swartz or one of the boys was talking about Poulter, Stephen, is that it is a national competition. The AFL put a lot of money into GWS and set up, we needed expansion teams needed that, right? But it's a national competition, so I'm under the belief, and I've got nothing. There's no agenda here for anything, right? I'm a believer that every club should be able to go anywhere in Australia to get players. I don't think one team should go to one area, because the Riverina have always had Wayne Carey and Wagga's got some unbelievable sports people there, Mark Taylor, a few others, but there shouldn't be one team can go in a region of Australia and pick that many players.
I think it's a great point, Stoney. We did away with draft zones a long time ago, and that's effectively what it is.
It is.
It's become a draft zone for Sydney and GWS.
So I think the point is with GWS, we wouldn't give them players, so we gave them draft picks, and we gave them plenty of good draft picks, and we're almost prepared to accept that they could win a premiership. What they're concerned about is that because they're cleverly selling and they sell these players, and they've already got 5 in the next 25 draft picks for next year.
Well, they've stockpiled them,
if they do it properly, they will do this forever. There's nothing to stop them doing this forever.
But there's there's one other point in this, right? Yeah. Is about the area of GWS where they recruit from. Is whether it be Albury and the Riverina, right? I don't believe that one club should be able to go to one region, because Troy brought up before, we had zones before, which I think should come back, mind you, is that there shouldn't be one club that can go to one area to pick up players, because if you have a gold mine there, you're not going to let everybody know you because you want to pan for the gold yourself.
Well, it makes equalisation look absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they've got to be careful, the AFL.
The AFL have given them a leg up. They're going to be an outstanding team. They're exciting to watch. But, hey, let's have a level playing field now for the rest of the competition. St Kilda, the Bulldogs, Melbourne, they haven't had any of these what's the word I'm looking
Zones.
for? No, they haven't had a leg
up.
up.
They haven't
from
had
the AFL.
they haven't had endorsements. And
Yeah.
can I say, Poulter and Steve? I would actually like to see. I think there is talk. I'd like to see the zones come back in, Poulter. I think it'd be a really good thing that, if North get a bit of Tassie and you can get players in a region, right? I think it'd be a really good thing to have zones back. And
But how do you work that out? Because we saw last time it worked reasonably, but not
what happened
fantastically.
was-
Because St Kilda loses the whole. Hawthorn had the peninsula when Zaning was brought in 1968-69. Hawthorn got the Mornington Peninsula. Why do they get the Mornington Peninsula when that's St Kilda of the club down there, and that should have been the area and had players playing for them in the 30s, 40s, and 50s from that area?
have to be realigned, Stephen. I'm just saying that if they're going to do it, realign it in the proper way, where your clubs are situated, where you're based.
Well, surely it's got to be geographically based, but then of course you've got a problem with that type of zoning where you've got Melbourne-based clubs within, 10 kilometres of each other. Most of them.
Yeah, but then it
in a
becomes
batch.
convoluted and very
When they
confusing.
introduced zones,
The draft's the way to go.
When they
The draft's good, yeah. I know that.
The only
the only
knock
advantage to the
I've got on
zones
the
is that
draft.
you develop your own players.
Yeah,
it's
I
an
understand that,
incentive,
Poulter.
isn't it?
Yeah, it is. The only knock I've got on the draft, I would go down the US route, and the bottom 8 teams, put them in a barrel, and pick one out. Then there's no worries about tanking. Who's going to finish
Yeah,
last?
that's a good point, Troy.
Playing for draft picks. If it's 8 put in, it could be the guys who finish 9th who get the number 1 draft pick. That's just the luck of the draw.
Tell me a club who's been successful by exploiting tanking, for instance, in any draft over a period of time.
Carlton last year
Who
against
are
the Brisbane Lions.
Yeah, where are they on the? Where are they on the ladder?
They got a guy called Jacob Wiedering,
Yeah,
who
did they?
looks
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the
Could be a
kid
good
can
player,
play.
Yeah.
Can play.
Where are Carlton on the ladder at the moment?
They're developing.
They're developing.
They're resetting, as
So
Brendan
they've got-
Bolton says.
Through an alleged tanking.
Would you agree with that,
Through an
Pops?
alleged tanking, they've got one player, and
Who looks like being a
it could
10
be.
to 15-year
It could be.
player who's
But-
going to be the backbone of their back line.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
none of us know where they're going to be in 4 or 5 years' time. And will they get another chance to do that? And would they want it? Would their supporters want them to finish last for 5 years to get the first 5 draft picks to put them in a position where they've got the nucleus of a finals team in 10 years' time? Where does it go? To me, I don't believe
A lot of
8
vagaries.
teams.
You've still got to pick the right people too.
Not one team
Melbourne
has
haven't
been
been able to pick the
proved.
right ones, have they?
Not
Until
one
now.
team
No,
has been proved to
they've
have
had a
tanked.
dry
Under
run,
the
Pops.
tanking rules, no one in our competition has ever tanked. No one has tanked.
Can I change tack again? Okay. Stephen, do you mind if I change tack again?
Yeah, I was waiting for a feedback on that, but no one knew all
No,
the
I don't disagree with you.
We're all
No,
incredulous.
I don't.
You must be in agreement.
There's no doubt that people have tanked. It's just a question. Clearly they've tanked. It's just I agree.
Oh, Stephen, come on, give me a spell. Do you want me to, come on.
I'm agreeing with you on the point that it hasn't proven to be successful for them. We
Unless
talk about
you-
Melbourne
you
and
have to-
Carlton, and they're still down the bottom, aren't they?
But in order to have a tanking situation be proved, you've got to have a conspiracy between players and coaches. You have to have a total conspiracy. And I don't want, as we get...
We don't play in clairvoyancy, Stephen.
no,
now.
you
We
know how
don't.
it
That's right, but I'm just saying that to have it, you've got to have the nucleus of a tank is a conspiracy. If you don't have the conspiracy, you don't have
Okay,
a
can I
tank.
put this to you? Putting players out the pasture, like need an injury update,
positions. That's a
playing
health issue.
playing different positions.
Yep.
What does that stand for?
Yeah, tell me a rule that says you can't send a player for an operation in round 12.
We're not talking about it, Stephen. I'm talking about.
Tanking then, all right?
Okay, we'll call it alleged.
Tanking in inverted commas.
No, I can't even handle that.
Stoney's right. I mean, you just put them in the wrong positions. You don't play.
You can't
them,
handle
take
the
them off
truth.
the ground.
Hey, Jack
That's
said
allowable
that.
under the rules.
Jack said that. You can't handle the
Allowable
truth.
under
The
the
only
rules.
tanking Peaky's interested in, boys, is Sherman tanking.
Now, can I change subjects now? During the week or recently, Bernard Tomic, Stephen.
yes, yes.
Okay, now Bernard Tomic.
Yep.
Right? Do we care? Now I'm going to ask you. I'm going to put it to you now. Do we care that he represents himself, or does he represent Australia when he plays tennis?
Tennis and golf are individual sports, and for 5% or 2% of their careers, they play a team game when called upon. President's Cup and with the golf, and whatever else, World Cup or whatever, golf, they might be representing the country then. But even then, it's to a certain degree illusory. The tennis players play Davis Cup and Hopman's Cup and Federation.
What when he
Cup.
comes to Australia and plays in Australian Open? Who's he play for?
He's playing for Bernard Tomic. He
Not
just happens to be an Australian playing.
Does
in
that sit
tournament.
well with you that he has an Australian flag under the bottom of his name?
He's allowed to do that. He's because he was born here and he's a resident here. He's domiciled here.
Should we allowed to put up with
Australian
his
passport.
Should we be allowed to put up with his petulance and Nick Kyrgios?
You've got no choice actually.
Should we worry about it? Should I worry about it?
At the end of the day, you've got to compare behavioural traits with precedent. So you've got to remember that as a legal man, I go by precedent. These players these days aren't anywhere near as rule breakers as in the past.
What, Newcombe and Cash?
I mean, I'm talking about, go back to Uli Nastasi, go back to Jimmy Connors.
I'm talking about Australian players.
McEnroe.
I'm talking about Australian players here.
Okay, Australian players, okay. This current batch, Kyrgios and Tomic, well, we were fortunate, or whatever, however you want to call it, in the 60s and 70s to grow up with some very well-mannered tennis players. No doubt about that. John Newcombe, Roy Emerson, Rod Laver, who'd you say? Ken Rosewell, John Alexander.
Tony Roach.
Tony Roach is another one. Yeah, played with Newcombe doubles and was a great individual tennis player. These guys came up the hard way.
Kim Warwick.
Who was that, sorry?
Kim Warwick.
Kim Warwick was another one. Wally Masseur. I mean, there's a Mark Ebenson. There's a gamut of them.
How Leighton Hewitt is their mentor, right?
Yeah.
Kyrgios and Bernard's mentor, right? Who was the school of hard knocks, right? Yeah. Now, I reckon he is a great person to be a mentor of a tennis player, right? But do they represent Australia or themselves?
They represent themselves. You got to remember, Hewitt he didn't come through the school of hard knocks like Newcombe and these guys who were whacking tennis balls up against garage walls after school. He was brought up with his parents supporting him all the way and had, coaches and all the rest of it, as some of them now get. You've got to remember where they come from. When you've got that background, if you respect a dollar, respect your family, respect the value of what you're doing, you'll grow up a certain way to a bloke who's handed all the rackets he needs, all the training facilities he needs, free gym memberships, free this, free that. Everything is for free. They grow up a bit petulant. That can happen.
So I move on from that subject.
But I don't know if that happened to Kyrgios.
Do I move on from that subject, do I?
No, well, you have to move on
It's
with
the age of entitlement, I think you're looking for.
That's part of it. But
sorry, Paul.
They still haven't been confirmed as starters in the Olympic Games. They've been selected.
They won't play.
Provisionally. So
I don't think they'll play.
There's a behaviour check on them.
There is a
from the people who run the Olympic
Isn't that sad?
certainties to play.
It's sad to think that possibly our two best tennis players. Well, I don't think tennis should be in the Olympics anyway. The two of the best tennis players who play for Australia won't play in the Olympics because of their petulance.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
They're difficult to harness.
I think you're probably right. I think they'll probably overlook it. But I read the other day where they said they still haven't decided whether their behaviour is good enough.
They're difficult to harness.
The tennis shouldn't be in the Olympic Games anyway. So
I couldn't agree with you more. Or golf.
Or golf. They're professional
should
sports.
Be just basic sports, from the
the
old days.
sports, the traditional sports in Greco-Roman times. Now, the Tomic thing really came up because he finished a match off the other day, the Madrid Open,
He was on match point.
On the match point where he
used an interesting return.
He changed the racket. He was hanging onto the head of the racket and tried to hit the ball with the
handle.
The handle.
Is it? Should we laugh at that, or we should should we laugh at it, or just say, well, how should we? Do we care? Should we care?
I did have a word to one of our listeners there, Michael Cook, about that this morning, and he thought it was poor, and he should have probably played the situation right out. But look, he
just needs to get a handle on his emotions, really, doesn't he?
It's very good from you, Troy.
He was, he was in a minute. Yep, he was in a position where the game was lost. He wanted to get on and probably go and have a massage or a shower. Wanted to get on the plane and get out of Madrid because he get to the next game because he knew that one he was never going to win that game. He was 2 sets down and 6-3 or whatever it was with the match point coming up. He just wanted to get off the court. It's a poor way of doing it. He should get fined 5-10 grand or whatever for it, for stupidity, immaturity, whatever you want to slap him with. But then that's it. I mean, if he wants to give that point away, the guy down the other end thinks, I don't sprain a muscle trying to win the last point. I got the game.
You've been a strident critic of Tomic's in the past, Stephen, haven't you?
Yeah. But not so much, Tomic at times with his petulance, but I was more concerned about the fact now he hasn't got his father around anymore, who has been, to me, the biggest problem in that camp. As we know, there's a litany of incidents which took place when the dad was around, and with the assault case in Spain, the boy seems to have grown out of that and now doing his own thing. Whether he's got, I'm not too sure what his management team is. I can't keep up with all the changes they make, but the dad doesn't seem to be around anymore, and I seem to think that he wasn't a good influence for that kid moving on, sort of thing. So he seems to have, to me...
Well, he's come a long way, hasn't he?
He has.
Returning match points with the handle of his racket.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, where does that leave? He's number 21 in the world. He's 22 in the world, and Kyrgios is 21. We've got 2 players in the top 22, and they're our 2 best players.
You know what?
If you say to me, Stephen, are you worried about the fact he did that? I'll tell you blankly, as a cold-faced lawyer, that I'm not worried about that at all. It was stupid. Fine him. Move on. It's not. I'm not going to. I'd tell him off if I was his coach. I'd say, mate, you shouldn't do that. Just fall over or something.
Stephen, what happened?
But don't do that.
What age does maturity start?
Oh well, some people never get mature, mate.
Thank you very much.
I think you're sitting Exhibit 1. Thank you very much.
That's a good answer, actually, Steve.
Pulse, what are your thoughts on Tomic? How do you see him in the landscape of Australian sport?
In the lexicon of Australian sport.
It's just the modern way, isn't it, Troy? You know,
I think that's a cop-out. I really do. It's the modern way. No, I'm not buying that.
Well, you know, tennis. We've been through all this 100 times, haven't we? Tennis players used to behave themselves. Now they don't. And you know,
Nastase, Connors, and McEnroe.
You know, it's a behavioural thing, isn't it?
Geoffrey,
It's just a talking point.
No, I think you're actually. This is where you're hammering the youngster because you know that Illy Nastase was terrible on a tennis court.
Yeah, I know. There's always exceptions.
And swearing and off the court. Well, I don't know anything about his off-court exploits, Mark. You know something.
There's a surprise.
Read the book.
The book. Okay, so he was petulant.
He was a colourful character.
Okay, a colourful tennis player.
Was his coach Ion Tiriac?
It was. Very good.
Yeah, well, there's another fellow who had a short fuse too. So
think
2
he
short fuses together.
Coach Boris
Can lead
Becker
to
at one stage.
A dynamite situation. Geoffrey, you've got some quirky points to make.
Just a little quirky point, Stoney.
Go for it.
And I just thought I did a bit of reading about a guy called Albert Leader Collier. This is the Gladiator of Sports program, and he was the true gladiator of Australian football. Now, he played his first game. He was captain of the Victorian schoolboys cricket and football teams at 14. Can you believe that?
Maturity, Stephen. Maturity.
Big maturity.
We're talking 1923. He plays his first game for Collingwood at 15. At 19, he leads a strike. He and another fellow lead a strike. Collingwood are going to put their pay down from £3 to a bit less because of the pression's coming on. He leads. Can you imagine a 19-year-old guy today leading a strike? This is Albert Collier. He wins the Brownlow at age 20. The next year, he's unemployed. Collingwood won't give him an allowance, so he goes to Tasmania and coaches Hobart for 2 years.
Did he really?
It was called Cannonor in those days. This is at the height of his career. He goes to Tasmania. He wins the medal over there. Can you imagine Collier and Laurie Nash playing in the same competition?
Sensational.
Yeah, this is before Laurie Nash came to the AFL. So
Laurie Nash,
and this is the guy.
Taswegian.
And I rang him years ago, 45 years ago. I was doing a series on the Brownlow Medal for Inside Football, and he didn't want to be interviewed. He was living down at Seaford. But he told me some stuff, and he said, he didn't even know where his Brownlow Medal was. But he gave Neil Mann £100 after the 1953 grand final. He said
£100 in 1953.
He gave it to him.
That's a lot of money.
He said, "This is not just for today." Neil Mann was best on the ground the 53 grand final. You know, the guy could put a dozen eggs in his hand.
I actually shook his hand.
Was he best man on ground, Poulter, was he?
He was. Well done. Albert was the best man on the ground in the 28 grand final. Troy. Albert at 19 was best man on the ground in the 28 grand final. He also mentioned about how in 29 they had the right to re-challenge, and because Richmond won the match, because they felt they could beat Richmond, they weren't all that flat out in the first time around. They beat them during the season, and in the replay they beat them comfortably. They got an extra 3 pounds or something. This is the tough days. So this is the guy who looked like he had his hair parted in the middle. He looked like you're a Collingwood man, Stephen. He looked something a bit of a mixture of George Raft, Don Amici, Eddie Cantor. Black, swarthy, dark.
Clark Gable.
Clark Gable in his early days.
An absolute.
Bruce Andrews.
He was
Brucey Andrews from the crowd over here, Michael.
Great nomination from the Bleachers.
Lou Richards used to say Bruce parted his hair with a theodolite, didn't he?
And plenty of brook cream.
So that's my quirky bit for the day. The gladiator, the true gladiator of footy, as much as a Whitner Barassi or a Reynolds or a Bunton or a Coleman or a Matthews, was Albert Lita Collier.
Albert Lita Collier, and also going on strike at 19 years of age. Collingwood had another incident involving striking with Tuddenham and Thompson, 1972, I think it was, overpay.
Yes.
When Peter Eakins came over from West Australia and he was getting 10 grand, and they were on 3 grand or 4 grand or whatever, and they went on strike, and of course Tuddy left. Tuddy left and went to Essendon, and Thompson stayed, but it put a big rift in the club, because at Collingwood they had the view that you played for the jumper, and that if you got the game with Collingwood, that was that was like a gift, whereas you should play for nothing virtually. They had an amateur point of view. For a club that had so much of a following, they didn't get into a marketing or into the 21st century in a marketing impact until Maguire got there in 1999.
Well, they were a blue-collar club in some fact, weren't they, Steve?
Yeah, to a certain degree, yeah. But that doesn't mean that you can't pay people. In fact, if you're a blue-collar club, you should be trying to pay your workers a proper wage if you're blue-collar to a certain degree. But it was the philosophy there that they were in. I mean, let's face it, the late John Wren, he used to go down there after matches and had the odd brown bag, cash or whatever, allegedly.
There was a lot of brown bags around the time, Steve.
You are on air.
Yeah, I'm talking about, yeah, I said allegedly, and the man passed away 50 years ago, so I don't think I've got any problems with that comment, Troy, at this point in time. Right, so here you go. Now, the teams, ladies and gentlemen, got some big matches coming this week. Have we got a big match on tonight? Richmond versus Hawthorn at the MCG at 7:50 p.m. Yep. That is now turned into, this is a line in the sand game. A battle of a team that has won the last 3 flags, who are at the moment, they're not on their knees, but they got walloped last week by a young team on the rise and maybe starting to feel the pinch of the last 8 or 10 years, up against a side that has been criticised uphill and down Dale for about the last 5 weeks. They've been torn apart by the media at Richmond.
Can you just read the Richmond outs, Stephen, quickly? I know we haven't got much time. Read the Richmond outs there.
Now, the outs for Richmond are Marich, Cochin, Lambert and Asprey.
Do you think
that... been dropped, Cochin's injured.
Now, Hodge is out for Hawthorn, yeah?
Hodge out for Hawthorn. He's got, I think it's a leg problem now, isn't it?
Yeah.
So he's starting to appreciate the Warrior. And Frawley and Lavelle.
Do you think that there's any way Richmond can win this game? Because I'm picking Hawthorn.
Richmond can't win with that side unless Hawthorn. If Hawthorn lose tonight, then they're on the slide. They're on the slide. If they lose tonight, that is a proof that they're on the slide. Troy?
Stephen, I think the Hawks, after absolutely having their pants pulled down last week by GWS, are looking to enforce some serious pain on the Tigers. I'm tipping an 8-goal victory by the Hawks.
Goals, yeah. Well,
40 points for me.
He doesn't mince his words.
Hawthorn have brought in a K brand, but it doesn't mean it's the new brand Hawthorn. I think it'll be fairly close to this, but without Rance and Cochin, you can't really go for Richmond, can you?
Hawthorn, 8 to 10 goals.
Record that.
Yep.
That was basically what I just said. Yeah, so record that.
Well, I'm agreeing with you. Yeah, for the first time in a long time. So, Collingwood versus Carlton here at the FCC tomorrow, 1:45 p.m. In for Collingwood is White for about his 15,000th crack at it. Aish and Crocker, the new lad who was captain, I think, of the Oakley Chargers, was he? Or have I got the wrong TAC Cup team? Yeah, I think I've got it right. Oakley under 18s. Out goes Sinclair, concussion, Langdon, ankle and Brown. Nathan Brown dropped. That's a bad sign. He's unfortunately got problems there. His pace has dropped off and, I don't want to be rude, but he's got a fairly slow turning circle now, I think, Nathan.
You know what? I can see Carlton winning this game. I'm going to pick them by less than a kick. 5 points Carlton for me.
Ooh, Collingwood have got a lot of injuries, we know. They got Adams out, and the other lad you mentioned was none other than... who was that again? Varco, wasn't it? Yeah, who's been in and out of the side due to injury. Carlton have got to Walker in, Everett and Cripps, the young Cripps, who's heading towards championship status at some stage. Phillips with the hamstring, Wettring's got a shoulder, and Graham is out. I'm going to tip Carlton. I think that after those outs, I think Collingwood have just got too much trauma going on there, and Carlton by just a couple of points because it's going to be tough. Carlton will have to tag side bottom. Mark, sorry, Geoffrey.
White's come into the black and white, and one day Melbourne will have an outstretched arms, won't they? But I think with the Collingwood will get over the line, but only just with all their problems, as you pointed out, Stoney.
Yeah, the inclusion of Cripps is one to watch out for. Just love watching him play.
Yeah,
he's in the same mould as a Patrick Dangerfield. Even if you're a neutral supporter, Stoney, you just love seeing Patrick Cripps out there. But look, let's be honest. They've gone back-to-back Carlton. It's the end of the ball game for them. Collingwood to hit back by 2 to 3 goals.
Okay, fair enough. Well, anything can happen here. I reckon it's $1.90 each of two, but the scribes have got Collingwood $1.36. They'll go up from there. They'll be $1.80.
That'd be disappointing to see both supporters go home disappointed.
A fitting result, Troy.
Be a draw, would it? That'd be what a miserable bunch they'd be.
Alan Ruthven said that once on World of Sport years ago. Remember the Baron from Fitzroy? Fitzroy playing Footscray, and he said, "Who do you think will win, Baron?" He said, "I think it'll be a draw." Why is that? He said, "Neither of them are good enough." Remember the Baron?
Yeah, the Baron. Yeah. Brownlow medalist, wasn't he?
Fitzroy player.
Geelong v West Coast are there at the Simon Stadium in wherever that is again, tomorrow at Geelong.
Is that Simmons Stadium, Steve?
Simmons Stadium, yeah. They change the name every year. It used to be Cardinia Park. It used to be Shell Shock Stadium. It used to be this year.
Move on.
I'll move on, yeah, okay. In comes Mackie, Stanley and Ruggles. Out goes Vardy. That's dropping for there. That's not good. Buse and Kalajny. In comes Yo for West Coast. Out goes Butler with a groin. Now, this is at Geelong, Troy.
Yes, being at Geelong, Stephen, I just think the Cats are purring at the moment. And West Coast don't travel well, especially down to Cardinia Park. So I'm tipping the Cats by 4 to 6 goals. A comfortable victory.
Another close encounter for me. And for me, Geelong by 11 points, Geoffrey Poulter.
Yeah, Stoney, I think the point Troy made about West Coast, there's a query on West Coast away from home at the moment, isn't there? And I can't see Geelong getting beaten down there tomorrow.
Yeah, look, Geelong at home going to make it very, very difficult for West Coast. Although it's got a good surface. We've had good weather conditions, so it could be they might feel like
fast track.
Yeah, well, it could be fast, firm track that they're used to playing in West Australia. West Coast. I don't think that the home ground advantage is going to be a big deal here, but Geelong, with their top-ups of what they've done over the summer, they've got a strong body side there. Pretty hard to tip against them down there. I'll just go Geelong within less than a goal.
It hurts you to do that too, Stephen, because I know how much you dislike the Cats. So
see, this is some sort of. There are
this is a conspiracy theory.
For Geelong that I didn't like, but
there is rain expected at the weekend too.
I don't. Have I made comments that have been derogatory of the club?
Look, the Saints have had some great tussles with the Cats over the journey.
There've been some great competitive natures. Look, they've got a bit of history going back into the 60s too, St Kilda and Geelong, because there were a couple of incidents which happened way back then that Geoffrey and I might have a yak about later on.
I don't follow Geelong, but I love watching them play. I think they're very entertaining to watch. So
they can be, and they're second on the ladder, so they've put themselves in a position, if they finish top 4, to give themselves a crack at a premiership when everyone had written them off a couple of years ago, including me. So Sydney v Essendon, that's at the SCG. Fantastic to see Sydney back on their true home ground. In comes Smith, out goes Allure. And the milestone is Jake Lloyd with 50 games. Essendon, in comes Grimmer or Grimer, depending on how you like to do it. Bird, McKernan, Maguli and Redmond. And out goes Stokes with a hamstring. Langford's got a rested.
Who are those ins again, Stoney? In English, please?
His name's Bagguley, Stephen.
Is it Bagguley?
Yeah.
Paddy's has been rested. The poor kids had to do so much work. Grimley and Gleeson.
Well done, you got 2 in a row right.
Don't you wish when you were playing Troy years ago and they used to give you the out of rested or managed or something? They just dropped me.
Managed.
I was dropped.
Yeah.
Not up to it.
Not good enough.
Managed is creeping in now.
Yes. And soreness and general soreness. And warehoused. Rested.
Stephen, Sydney by 40 for me.
Sydney by 40. Troy?
Yeah, Sydney by up to 12 goals.
It doesn't mince words.
With the Bucks,
I think they'll win easily because They've brought Nathan Grimer out of retirement to play on Buddy Franklin.
back.
So if you look forward to that one, Stony.
Will he ever?
Hope it's a wet day.
He's played on him in the past, I think, when he was at North.
about
The
10
Grimer,
years ago,
Grimer.
so-
What do you call him? You call him Grimer or Grimer? Is it Grimer? Is it?
Grimer, yeah.
He's a
Nathan
Tasmanian
Grimer.
boy.
Grimer. Well, we had a
Launceston
heavyweight
boy.
boxer many years ago, and his name was James Grimmer, and it was spelt the same way. So how does that
I think
happen?
it's up.
He's born in Tasmania, so it's Grimer.
This one was. So that's the Tasmanian version
It's
of it.
a Tasmanian
okay,
version.
fair enough. Where were we? Okay, I tipped Sydney by 3 to 5 goals.
Colts.
Yes, Sydney by a hell of a lot.
Okay, a hell of a lot. Okay, well, can't quite configurate that, but we
Great
understand
tip, Colts. Well done.
Gold Coast are playing Melbourne. The disappointing Gold Coast. In comes Sard, Garlett, McPherson. Out goes Davis, McKenzie with an ankle, and Willis. With a new man, Darcy McPherson from the Northern Under-18s. Good to see them blooding someone. In comes Garland, Nietzsche, Stretch, and Oliver for Melbourne. Out goes Lamumba with concussion. Dunn's dropped, Froster's dropped, and Salem's got concussion. Troy. At Metricon Stadium.
At Metricon Stadium,
Yep.
I think the Gold Coast will get over the Demons in
Oh.
a close one, in a very close one. 1 to 2 goals. I think there'll be maybe 12 points in it, Stoney.
This is the roller coaster cup, this one.
Yeah, it is.
Because both sides are on roller coasters, and Gold Coast are near a roller coaster.
And they were embarrassed last week at
were.
Kardinia Park. The Cats actually tore them a new one, so they'll be looking to bounce back.
And for that, I reckon the Gold Coast will win by 4 goals.
Gold Coast by 4, says Frank
The
Stone.
hardest game
Geoffrey.
in the round to pick, Stephen. If Melbourne lose this match, they've lost a lot of the ground that they've made up over the last
You're
few
spot on.
weeks, haven't they?
Yep.
But if Gold Coast lose, where are they
Gold
going?
Coast have got so many injuries. I just think they're vulnerable. They've got 8 out of their best 22, haven't they?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go for Melbourne just purely to prove that they have improved. Because if they don't, they haven't.
Well, you're correct. If Melbourne lose this, then all the good work that Ruse and the team have put together in recent times, and plus their summer, it nearly goes out the window, and they're heading for the bottom 4. So, but Melbourne just have to show something here. They've got to stand up. Last week they were insipid at times against St Kilda. I was at that game, and they just weren't on the pace. Western Bulldogs are playing Adelaide at Etihad Stadium tomorrow, 7:40 p.m. Big game there at night. That'll be a massive game there. Those two sides, both of them top 6, top 4 Bulldogs, top 6 Adelaide teams. In comes Redpath and Daniel, the fellow who runs around with a helmet, and out goes Stevens with an abdominal, and
Great description that was. A
Yong.
short bloke who runs around with a helmet.
Just as well he's got an abdominal
Now,
too.
Pulse,
Get this guy a mirror. He needs
what,
to have a good
what's
look
your
at
thoughts
himself.
on that game, Pulse?
We haven't said hang on, Adelaide. In comes Henderson and Crouch. Out goes Laird with a toe, and Lyons.
Well, until Stephen said Laird with the toe, I was prepared to think that Adelaide hadn't had a problem this year. They've been virtually injury-free. And whereas Bulldogs have had problems, and I know Etihad suits the Bulldogs, but Adelaide is just about the form team of the competition, isn't it? So I'm going for Adelaide narrowly.
For me, I think that this is a big water test for the Bulldogs. They have to win the game. They'll win by a point. It'll be a close one, a cracker. I like Adelaide as a football side. Both of these sides are about even par. So that's why I'm going for Western Bulldogs by a point, because it's at Etihad.
Okay, well, the Western Bulldogs have picked Lockie Hunter. Now, fair income. I mean, the way they carried on about that during the week I thought was ridiculous and whinging. I mean, now, look, Lindsay Thomas, the boy had actually gone, he was slipping down his knees when he got tackled, right? So it would have been very difficult for Thomas to get, he would have had to have been a limbo dancer to get Yellow, and he gets 2 weeks for that with a week if he pleads guilty. As Bradcott's get, if we challenge it, because he's Lindsay Thomas, he'll get suspended anyway. It's the most ridiculous suspension I've ever seen. He didn't throw a punch or anything or an elbow.
And why wasn't the committee meeting the next morning before everyone could, Dwantum Pelly and all these people could talk about it over the weekend?
Well, I need to watch it, the Bullies. You start whining like that, that can people start to think you're insipid.
Who's going to win?
Yeah, we're winding things around. Fremantle against the... Oh, we got our tips, don't we? I'm tipping
Winding
Adelaide.
things up, not around.
Troy. Who'd you pick, Troy?
Adelaide.
The Dogs. The Dogs by 3 to 4 goals.
Okay.
Well, I'm tipping Adelaide because, number one, I want to see them win this because I'm not happy with the way the Bulldogs handle that Hunter case during the week. I've got an aggravation about that, Geoffrey.
No, I'm going for Adelaide narrowly.
Adelaide narrowly with me. So Fremantle v GWS Giants. This is going to be a tough testing game for Fremantle, even on their home turf. At Subiaco there. In comes Ibbotson, Subin. I've got, I know what I'm doing. Hughes, Echo Clark there,
Really?
Gray and Tucker. No change at the Giants. Geoffrey?
I'm going for the Giants.
Giant, yep. I'll go for the Giants.
Giants.
Giants by 5 goals.
Giants by 3.
Giants by 5.
5, okay. We know that. St Kilda North Melbourne in a big game on Sunday, 3:20 p.m. Mother's Day. No change really at St Kilda yet. The extended bench, and North have got quite a few changes there. Geoffrey, Income Nahas, Door, Mullet, Mackenzie and Wood out goes Thomas suspended stupidly, and Turner. What do you say?
Can't go on winning forever, but I hope it makes it 7-0.
Yeah, well, he's got a good point there. Sooner or later, the laws of probability can catch up with this. I'm going to tip my team by 2 points, St Kilda.
North under a goal, be a close contest. St Kilda will come at North Melbourne, 5 points to the Kangas.
That's a sensible thing to say. And Troy.
Look, I'm tipping the Saints to put in a great performance.
Oh, yeah. Listen to the rider.
But in saying that,
Yeah, here it comes.
North are on fire, and I think they should get by 6 to 8 goals.
Port Adelaide v Brisbane. Port Adelaide v Brisbane, gentlemen, quickly.
Port Adelaide.
Port Adelaide.
Port Adelaide.
Port Adelaide. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls out there in Gladiators of Sport land, that's the end of the 5th edition of the Gladiators of Sport here at Liquid Black Coffee, 165 Ashworth Street, Middle Park, down by the Bayway. Thank you very much, Alan Mance Holden, Yellow Door, and Ricardo Struttoria, and also Spirtico, a Greek restaurant in South Melbourne. I visited the other night. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Troy.